So without any further ado, let's kick things off to the panel here. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Patty Ann, and she's going to talk about managing anxiety during the pandemic. Patty?
Thank you so much, Sam. Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Patty Ann Tublin, as Sam just mentioned, and I'm CEO and founder of Relationship Toolbox LLC, which is a coaching, consulting, and professional boutique speaking firm. I am so delighted and honored to be a part of this HR forum call during these incredibly difficult times. When Sam and Char reached out and asked me to speak, I was so excited and delighted to join you today. And I thought to myself, what's the best information that I can provide you now where I can give you some really valuable information that's and useful that you can use right after we have this call. So I thought for a while, and I reached into my 30-plus experience as a professional steering coach and consulting who has traveled the world, shared my relationship tips and my expertise as a communication, relationship, and emotional intelligence expert. And I came up with today's presentation I thought would be really valuable for you as an HR executive and a business entrepreneur. So without further ado, I'd like to share with you a little bit of an understanding as anxiety that we are all facing today during this crisis. Here's what's really important to know. Anxiety during any time of change is normal, natural, and healthy, right? One of the reasons why people naturally don't like change is because it makes us anxious. And who wants to feel anxious? And when the coronavirus thrusts this change upon us, the speed of the change really increases our anxiety. Now, anxiety in and of itself is not bad. As a matter of fact, anxiety has a lot of positive benefits to it because what it does is it motivates our behavior to perform. So think about it for a moment. When you were a kid and you would have a test in school, you would get a little anxious. And therefore, that anxiety would create behavior in you and cause you to study. If you're an athlete, you get nervous, anxious before an event. So what does that do? That makes you practice, the same as if you're a musician. If you're in business and you're about to go out on a sales call, it makes you a little anxious, so you prep. So anxiety in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's actually very healthy. But let me explain to you what's going on with the coronavirus, where the anxiety has gotten out of control. And then I'm going to share with you 3 simple and yet very powerful tips that you can use to decrease your anxiety during this pandemic, and you'll be able to put it into action. And do not underestimate the power of simplicity. So here's what's going on for everybody. Anxiety left unchecked, rapidly evolves into fear. And when you think about the emotion of fear, fear is an emotion that is future-oriented. We are afraid of what's coming down the pipe. We are afraid of the unknown. So think about fear as an acronym that stands for F is false, E is evidence, A is accepted, and R as real. So what's happening during the pandemic now is the anxiety has gone left unchecked, and it has evolved or devolved into fear, where there's false information that everybody thinks is real. That fear then rapidly devolves into panic. And that's what we're seeing today during the pandemic. So here's what happens. We go into the grocery store and there's an entire aisle that's normally stockpiled high, and it's totally empty. We cannot find toilet paper. We can't find Lysol. We can't find hand wipes, and there's no chicken. We're already a little anxious. We're a little afraid. We see that, we panic, and then a vicious cycle is created. But here's what's going on. It's not that we don't have the toilet paper or the chicken or the hand wipes. It's that people are hoarding them. So the 5 people that got to the aisle before you took a year's supply of all that stuff, if you will, and then we're left with nothing. But it feeds into the anxiety that there's a shortage of food, everything's out of control, the world is coming to an end. That's the state that everybody is in today. And that's why everybody is so outrageously anxious. So I think it's important that you understand that how we got to where we are with the anxiety, because in a lot of ways it's unprecedented. And anxiety makes us so uncomfortable. So what I'd like to share with you now are 3 tools that you can use that will undeniably decrease your anxiety. And here's the first one. During these crazy times, there are so many things about the corona pandemic that we cannot control. There's no denying that. And I am not going to minimize the things that are out of our control. However, what we need to do is tip number 1, control what you can control. Now, what do I mean by that? The most important thing that we need to control during this crisis is the very thing that we can control, and that's the good news. And that is our mindset. Nobody can tell you how you should look at this pandemic, how you should feel about it, what your attitude can be. You are the only one that creates your mindset, and you have a choice. You can look at this pandemic as Armageddon and the sky is falling and the world is coming to an end. And some people have made. However, I would suggest, in my opinion, that having the lights, having food, being able to get on this webinar to your internet, I don't think how Armageddon looks. That's just my guess. Or you have the choice to look at this and think, wow, these are challenging times. There's no denying it. How can I make these challenging times work for me? Will I allow it to defeat me, or will I allow it to expand my horizon and to look at things through a different lens? If you take the mindset that this is Armageddon, you will have your head in the sand and you will act as if the world is coming to an end. You will feel as if you have no control over anything. The coronavirus has taken over your life. It has taken over your thoughts, and therefore it determines your action, because your mindset will determine your decisions, your choices. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But your energy will go where your thoughts flow. So you have a choice. You can look at this as a challenge for, what can I do differently now? Let's embrace this as an opportunity for change. Maya Angelou said that I may not be able to control all the changes happening around me, and that applies for today. However, I refuse to be reduced by it. So you can make a mindset where you can grow from this, you can expand, you can see this as an opportunity for, how can I challenge what was the status quo and come out bigger, better, stronger? Different? Absolutely different. We are back to what we were before. This is a paradigm shift that will absolutely transform every aspect of your personal and your professional life. But change doesn't mean bad. It just means different. So create a mindset where you are evolving and emerging. Because the fact of the matter is that crises has created some of the best opportunities if you're willing to look for them. During the Great Fires of London, they said that Albert Camus wrote the book, during the bubonic plague, Camus wrote The Plague. During the Great Fires of London, literary scholars pretty much believe that Shakespeare wrote some of his great works. And during the fires of London also, they believe that Isaac Newton created the theories that literally revolutionized the way we think of how the world spins. So this is an opportunity if you have the mindset to look at it that way. Let's fast forward to today. In the year 2000, we had Y2K. If you remember that, we thought the world was coming to an end. And then we had AIDS, and then we had MRSA, and then we had SARS. Now we have COVID-19. Yes, this is a little different because the speed is huge, but with the speed comes an incredible opportunity to change, because a crisis forces us to do things differently. It forces us to reprioritize how we live our lives and how we do our work. This is an opportunity if you use your mindset to see it as such. If anyone read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, it is a classic. I absolutely encourage you to read it. It's a short book. And in that book, Viktor Frankl talked about who survived the concentration camp, because everybody in the concentration camp was in the same horrific environment. Like we're in the same environment now. They were all in the same environment. And what he discovered was the people that created the mindset for the will to live, the desire to come out of it alive, then made choices that in fact allowed them to live in the face of the worst of humanity. So I would caution, I would urge you to think about that and to have a positive mindset that only you can control. That's the first thing, that when you realize you have control over the most important thing of control that you can control, your mindset, that in and of itself should decrease your anxiety. The second tool that will absolutely help you decrease anxiety is to, I urge you, limit the amount of time that you expose yourself to information about the coronavirus. We live in a 24/7 news media cycle. We have TV that's 24/7, a gazillion cables, the channels that we could tune into. We have podcasts, we have webinars, we have so much information out there that what happens to us is we become overwhelmed. There's a concept of we become flooded with information. And sometimes knowledge is power, but too much knowledge, too much information just feeds into our fear, right? And the news media, what sells is fear. So they're not going to focus on the positive. They're going to focus on the negative, to keep you tuned in, to get you addicted to that fear, that anxiety. So what I strongly suggest is limit the amount of time you expose yourself to the news. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be aware of what's going on. As a business leader, as a business owner, as a parent, as a member of the community, you have to be informed. You must be able to educate yourself. But you don't need to be glued to the news every hour on the hour. It will not serve you well. It will not be productive. It will only increase your anxiety. Very important. Now, simultaneous with limiting how much time you expose yourself to the media, just as importantly is Get your information only from reliable sources. For the ladies on the call or the men on the call that ever had a partner who was pregnant, do you remember that when you were pregnant, all of a sudden, everybody was an expert on pregnancy, right? The guy next door who was a butcher was an expert on pregnancy. And then you had a baby. And all of a sudden, everybody is an expert in child psychology. And then you rapidly learned that, you know what? They really don't know any more than us. That's what's going on today in the media with the coronavirus. So the reliable source that I would recommend is two. One is get your information from the CDC. They are the ones that will give you the most accurate, honest information. Nobody else has a filter, so information can just come out to you. And also listen to Dr. Tony Fauci, right? So those two people are the people that I would listen to when it comes to information on COVID-19. Everybody else is just giving you their noise, and that will absolutely, unequivocally increase your anxiety. So I urge you, limit the amount of time you expose yourself to the TV, to the radio, to the podcast, all the so-called experts. Only listen to the CDC and Dr. Fauci. That will really serve a purpose of decreasing your anxiety, and you won't be so fearful or panicked. That's the second tool. The third tool absolutely falls after the first one, which was create a positive mindset. What you need to do, and this again will allow you to do something, right? Because when we don't do anything, we feel helpless. It increases the anxiety and the fear. Look for the opportunity. Look for the silver lining. There is always a silver lining. There is always an opportunity. I shared with you earlier about Shakespeare and Isaac Newton and some of the best playwrights, all born in crisis, in horrible times. Some of the best companies in the world that we know of today were born during a crisis, including the apps, actually the internet. So but if you're not looking for the opportunity, if you're not looking at this as an opportunity to say, how can I come out of this better? What's the opportunity? What will the future of work look like? What will the future of education look like? How can I recreate, reinvent my work and my life so I can be a thought leader going forward? If you remember, before Uber, nobody would have thought that the taxi cab industry would have been disrupted the way it was prior to Uber. Now we all know it. It's like, of course. Well, you now have the opportunity during this crisis to reevaluate how you work, what you want your work to look like, anticipate the future of work, and then start to create a formula, a process, a game plan that will allow you to lead the charge. Nothing is staying the same. And the way you do that is get your people around you. We're all experiencing the same thing, but everybody will have a different perspective on it. That difference of perspective will be where your genius will be found. You're a diamond in the rough now. Access your resources. They will look at things differently. Imagine what your company would look like if you were creating it today with the knowledge you have now, but it never existed before. What would it look like?
So Dr. Patty Ann, so just real quick, we have a question right around that particular topic there.
Okay.
And you mentioned evolution and how companies can evolve, and you were just talking about trying to find out what companies should do for that next step. And so, but the big problem is that a lot of our employees right now are super anxious. So what can managers do to really redirect their outlook to look into that evolution or that next step in their business?
Okay, great question. Thank you for asking it. So what the managers need to do first and foremost is the managers must make sure that they have their emotions under control. So if you have employees that are anxious and you are trying to guide them, if you present to them in an anxious manner, you will only raise their anxiety. So first and foremost, every manager, every leader on this call has to be aware of what they are feeling, especially if it's anxiety or fear, and get it under control. And there's many techniques for that, which we don't have time for right now, but I can talk about that a little bit later. Absolutely deep breathing, but they need to be aware of what they're feeling and then acknowledge what their employees are feeling. Acknowledge these are difficult times. Everybody's feeling anxious, right? So first be with them, join them. There's a concept of holding them, hold their emotion, and then let them know, as the wise King Solomon said, this too shall pass.
So there's the other perspective of just having managers interacting and having that relationship with their direct reports and their employees and so forth. But what should leadership be doing as far as right now to alleviate some of this anxiety in their companies?
Okay, so what leadership needs to be doing is they absolutely be able to manage their own emotions. They need to educate themselves on what is going on with the coronavirus. As a leader, you should know. And then they need to make sure that their voice is different than everybody else's. As a leader, when you are communicating, you should be above the crowd, right? Because leaders want people now during a crisis want to be able to look at the leader as someone that will provide them with comfort and that will be visionary, someone that will take them out of this crisis and lead them forward. Very, very important. So what a leader needs to do is to let their people know that we are moving forward. We will be transformed. Acknowledge that we will be transformed. Now, let's speak about what that will look like. What do you think? Like, ask them to engage in that. What they think they can bring to the table, what their vision is, what will look different. Very, very important to let everybody know you understand this is a crisis, you are in transforming, your role might look different, but what do you think you can do to contribute going forward? The other thing, very important, is make sure that you are communicating judiciously. We have a lot of communication out there. We don't need more communication. We need wise communication. So when they get your email or they hear your all hands on deck call, they will say, oh, there will be something wise that is going to be communicated to me now.
Thank you, Dr. Patty Ann. I tend to see this as being the light in the storm, being the lighthouse, and through all the murky waters, and also just thinking of option A, option B, option C. What could the vision look like through uncertain times? So thank you. And you're right. I personally have dealt with that anxiety component and trying to get that under control so I can help everyone see through this.
Exactly. And it's what your piece, and I worked so much with this. You need to be the calm in the eye of the storm. And in fact, that's what a leader does. You know, a crisis doesn't make a leader, it reveals it. And that's also tied into my work with emotional intelligence, right? You have to have high emotional intelligence. You need to be able to manage your emotions, be able to control them so that you can understand what other people's emotions are and be able to help manage that as well.
Great. Well, thank you for that. That was very informative and got a lot of good information out of there. Thank you, Dr. Patty Ann. So,
okay, so before we stop, if that's all the time we have, which was pretty much covered everything, right? We understand you don't want anxiety to go on. The 3 tools to de-it, right? Create a positive mindset, right? Limit the amount of time you watch the news and where you get your news, and then look for the opportunity. And unfortunately, there's so much more I have to share with you. But if this resonated with you in any way, then I would encourage you to, I think there's a slide there where I'll be having a complimentary call next Tuesday. And I would encourage you to go on the link. I don't think it's this, another slide. Sign up that complimentary call, because I'll be talking about anxiety, the coronavirus, and its influence on business leadership. And if you can't make the call, that's okay. We'll record it. And I also have a link here on, you can also link in with me on LinkedIn, where I have a great article that I think you'll find helpful.
Great.
So hopefully take this information and put it into practice.
Perfect. And we'll also have your link on the CompTeam website when we post this, the recording and also the slides. You can get to Patty Ann's website or her LinkedIn through that source as well. So thank you, Dr. Patty Ann. That was great.